I don't know if anybody recognizes the spot, but this is where I was last winter, late winter, when everything was absolutely dead quiet. And I just felt really off, and I couldn't keep my back to the forest behind me. I left. I think a few people screenshot something back there behind me. Whatever. I just left. There's bird sounds around me right now. You can hear the wind. Feels absolutely normal in here right now. But it's funny. One thing I can take note, I don't know if I shared it or not back then, but about maybe 3 kilometers back in the mainline logging road, I had my window unrolled. I mean, there's ice everywhere. And I recall coming around a bend, sharp bend to left, and I could hear frog sounds on my left ear with the window unrolled. Like, I mean, screaming loud frog sounds. And I thought it's just a fluke. Holy cow, you know. And when I got out of the truck in here, there was this frog sounds back in that swamp back in there, that direction, were absolutely louder than hell. I couldn't believe it. And then everything just went absolute flat line. You couldn't hear nothing. And it was really creepy. Really creepy. Didn't feel comfortable at all. I felt absolutely uncomfortable, and I could not sit here. It's on video. And I left. I'm here now, everything's cool. But anyway, I'm on my way home. Gotta go home for a bit, and then I'll be back. I'm gonna guide for a bit, and then carry on. But anyway, I gotta make one mention about something, you guys, because it's so, sometimes, you know, especially when I'm alone in the woods or alone in the water, and you think about stuff a lot, and you learn a lot of things, and it's so, too bad you couldn't trace it back. Too bad you couldn't trace back like you can an email to the original person who created and maintained and started not trusting your neighbor, not trusting your community. Actually almost getting to be mainstream to automatically call people a liar, bullshitter, crazy, discredit them, annihilate them, attack them because they're sharing honest knowledge with their community. Isn't that bizarre? Wouldn't you like to just be able to, I mean, obviously it's impossible, but I sure would love to be able to trace it back to the original sack of shit who started that and made it trend. Because it's pretty pathetic, don't you think? There's so many good people here. There's so many intelligent, good people here. And like I said before, this channel, if you come here demanding bones or demanding proof, just walk back out the door you walked in. There's nothing here for you. It's amazing. You know, I'm trying to get the credibility back to people. I'm trying to get the trust back. I'm trying to get the circle of good, honest people back, community back, right? Jake brake. If you wonder what that sound is, that's a Jake brake on a logging truck. Should be rumbling by fairly close to you pretty quick. But, like, can you imagine how dumb you'd have, you know, messed up between the ears you are today if, let's just say, a relative, a friend of yours, a coworker, somebody you grew up with, looked you square in the eye and said, hey man, I just saw this 8-foot-tall, 9-foot-tall, hairy, man-like thing looking at me in the timber, scared the living shit out of me. And your mind goes, yeah, well, you know, I'd like to believe, but I'm one of those types that are on the fence. You know, I'd like to see one for myself, right? No matter what you tell that mind today, they're not going to be able to accept it. There's nothing you can do for that brain to accept the honest facts from good people. And that's frustrating to me. I can literally feel the ground shake from that fully loaded logging truck, which drove by about 60 meters away from me. Crazy. Here comes the dust cloud. But anyway, and then if you take that same person with that same mindset, and then you present to them another 10,000 eyewitnesses from around the world describing the exact same thing, and their brain will still say, yeah, you know what, it just doesn't matter. You know, I'm on the fence. I'd really like to believe, but I'd have to see something like that for myself. You know, there's also people believe they see some things, and actually they didn't see what they think they saw, and that's what their brain keeps on telling them. It's amazing to me. And then you tell that same brain, well, there's actually, you know, they have literally hundreds of hair samples thousands of footprints, photographs of the footprints, dermal ridges, and they actually have over 115, 20 DNA samples. And that same brain will go, I don't know. I'd have to see one myself to believe it, some real solid evidence. And that's when my brain finally will throw in the towel and go, okay, you know what? You're about as smart as a pickle. There's no saving you. There's no help. There's nothing here for you. Just leave. Right? Just leave. If you cannot take the word of tens of thousands, now it's probably hundreds of thousands of first-hand eyewitness encounters, dozens and dozens of hair samples, over 100 DNA samples, video proof, photographic evidence, dermal ridges, footprints. If you can't accept that as real and keep challenging and trying to deadlock it with saying, we need proof, well, I'll be the messenger. Shoot the message all you want. I don't care. You're as smart. You're probably not even as smart as a pickle. I can't believe you are actually surviving in this world today on your own. Whereas you probably aren't surviving on your own. You're probably dependent on a whole lot of people for your survival. Whatever. It is what it is. But I like getting that out there every now and then just to say, hey, quit being so frickin' stupid. You know what? The dumbest thing society does today is not trust each other. It's really, really sad. It's really unfortunate how our communities used to survive with each other, help each other at all costs, create and provide real tight-knit, awesome, close-knit communities. Now we don't trust anybody. Everybody's a liar. Everybody's a hoaxer. Everybody's an opportunist. Everybody has an agenda, hidden agenda. Anyway, I'm really, really tired. I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning. It's probably 3 in the afternoon. And that really can frustrate me, but for when you hear me tell people just to leave, that's why. Just leave. There's nothing here for you. This group of people is for the very, very intelligent people who basically know what's probably going on the face of the planet today. So realize that eyewitness testimony from people of your community is as good as frickin' gold. Because it is. Alright? So get on with that. Let's share some emails here from people who would love to be heard, people who would love to help their community, people who need to get something off their chest. And this is the place to do it. I'll tell you what. What do we got? I'm looking at different folders in my notes. I know I've got a whole pile that... Alright, what's this? Titled Just a Rock. Mark it as red. Hi Steve, been watching your channel a few months. I appreciate that you offer a place where people can share their experience without fear of ridicule. A couple years ago, my daughter and boyfriend and myself, were driving just east of Greenwater, Washington on Highway 410. We were listening to the radio and they mentioned an asteroid shower coming up, and we were talking about that when all of a sudden we see a large rock coming through the air toward us. It appeared to be a little larger than a softball. It didn't come from the sky. However, you could make out the arc/trajectory of it. It had come from the side of the road, and judging by our speed at the time, about 100 yards ahead of us. We were so mesmerized by this rock coming at us, we didn't think to look if we could see who threw it. It hit the base of the windshield with obvious force, and if it hadn't hit the windshield wiper and completely destroyed it, I'm sure it would have gone all the way through the glass. We slowed down and looked where we estimated that it had been thrown from, thinking it was a person. We saw no sign of anyone or anything. On further recollection, we decided it couldn't have been a person. A human being could not have possibly thrown a rock that size that far. Bears don't throw rocks. We passed no other vehicles for several minutes in either direction. Meteors don't come from the side of the road. There were no cliffs nearby. The stretch of road was straight and flat, and the dense tree line about 15 to 20 feet from the road. We decided that the only thing that made sense was a Bigfoot. We don't talk about this with anyone but ourselves anymore, since the few times we did tell anyone else, we were met with scoffing and disbelief. They said things like, it was just blasting going on in a national forest and no roads closed. There were no other very nice things said, so we just kept our mouths shut now. So thanks again for your channel and a safe place to tell our experiences, Sandy B. Okay, Sandy, thanks for that. And you're not alone, obviously. Indigenous guy, First Nations guy, I met up with on the beach here at the beginning of the West Coast Trail, what, a month and a bit ago. He was telling me about them driving out here late at night, and a whole tree, like big log-like tree, was thrown coming at them out of the timber. They had swerved to miss it on the logging road just up here in the middle of the night. So you're not alone with things getting thrown in the vehicle that a human couldn't pull off. What a crazy thing to witness. This is titled My Story. Hi Steve, first I'd like to express my gratitude for you and all that you do in providing a forum for our stories of woo without the dismissive judgment. Thanks for your no-nonsense attitude and your great bullshit meter. My story is not Sabe related, but is woo. When I was a child, I saw spirits. My family was on a family vacation in PEI in the 60s. That's Prince Edward Island, Canada. My dad stopped in front of a hotel close to the beach, and the family was discussing if we wanted to stay there. I asked if anyone else could see the people dressed in old-fashioned clothing. My eldest sister leaned into me and said, "Don't ever talk like that again." My dad said, "Okay, we'll find another place." When I was 6, I was playing hide-and-seek with my siblings and a bunch of other kids in Georgian Bay, Ontario. It was time to run and go hide, and I ran on a path through some brush. All right, I'm not going to read that. It's all right. Hi, Steve. My story isn't exciting, but it is what it is. For a little info on my background, I've been a logger, cowboy, and a truck driver. I've had 3 strange sightings. Things happened to me. First, in the early 2000s, I was driving down I-90 in central Washington State in a Freightliner truck. It was mid-afternoon and slightly snowing. I had just topped a hill and was going fairly slow. I looked to my left and something came out of the tree line, a long quarter, short half-mile away. I wasn't for sure what it was, but whatever it was flat out covering the ground. I don't think that I've ever seen anything run that fast. As it came closer, it went over the right-of-way fence without breaking stride. It crossed right in front of me. It looked at me with the look of one of us shouldn't have been there. As it went by me, it put its right hand on top of the hood, like you or I would when walking by a car we got too close to. Only the hood of that truck is just over 6 feet off the ground. Then it was past me and gone. I didn't feel fear, anger, surprise, or anything at all. I felt absolutely nothing. When something runs in front of me, I feel something, but not this time. Now describe what I saw. It was a large, booed, B-O-O-E-D creature. It had something, I don't know what, over its left shoulder and ran so smooth, almost like its feet barely touched the ground. I got a very good look at his face when it looked at me. I saw a light-colored, broad, hairy face. 2 years later, I was watching Brendan Fraser's movie, The Mummy 3, I think. When I saw the Yeti they had, it was almost a perfect match. Maybe not twins, but whoever designed them must have seen what I saw. Second, I'll make this very short. While baling hay in the Owyhees, pronounced Owyhees, I had 3 very bright lights fly over me in a triangle formation, 1 in front, 2 behind. It looked like a scene out of World War II fighters zigzagging across the sky. Then the lead one exploded, and the other 2 turned hard right and left. The next day the news said it was a meteor. I don't believe them. Third, while driving, north out of San Francisco on 101, I saw what I thought was 2 planes dogfighting, like I used to see when I was a kid. Then the wings flapped. They were not airplanes, but very, very big birds. I don't know what kind of birds they were. They were huge. Maybe somebody here knows what kind of birds I saw. Thanks, Mark. Mark, that's a hell of a share. The thing touching the hood of your vehicle. That's frickin' crazy, man. I cannot believe what that must have been like to experience that. That must have been something else. Mark, thanks for going out of your way to email me that, all right, to share with the people. If you got anything else you want to share in the future, please do, especially if you feel it's going to help people. Hello, my name is Ken. I'm 56 years old, and I spend my summers camping on Cedar Mountain. Wife, the grandson, and whoever else likes to come with me. My experience happened in the summer of 2019 in Mammoth Creek area of Cedar Mountain. I got up one morning to build a fire to make coffee like I always do. I'm always the first one up. So I was getting ready to light the fire and heard knocking sounds coming from a direction where nobody camps. The closest campers were at least a mile away. I stopped what I was doing and looked up but didn't see anything. I scanned the tree line and there was nothing. I kept hearing it for about 10 minutes and I said to myself, I know it's you. Come over and get a cup of coffee. If you want, just jokingly. Kama and the knocking sound stopped abruptly. I sat there and waited for the sound to start up again, but it never did, so I went about the day doing with camp chores, cooking breakfast, chopping wood, and whatever else needed to be done. Later that afternoon, we were sitting around the fire talking, and all of a sudden, about 30 yards away in the tree line, an aspen tree just fell over. We could see in the tree line, and there was nothing over there to make it fall over, no wind or anyone over there messing around, and we all looked at each other like, what the hell? I know trees fall in the forest all the time, but why did that one tree right there by camp decide to fall over? Nothing else happened that summer. I decided to tell my story after hearing the story about the couple that was at Barker Reservoir, which is only about 50 to 60 miles away from where we camp. Love what you're doing. I listen to your stories all the time. I started listening to your stories before you even started talking about Sasquatch. Keep up the great work. One day everyone will find out the truth. All right, Kenneth, thanks for that email, man. Thanks for that share. Appreciate it, and the kind words. Appreciate the kindness and support for all the people here. Share more if you get it, all right? Hi, Steve. I enjoyed your channel for some time now. I want to thank you for giving us a place to unload these stories, as I know I'm not the only person who has held their stories so close for so long out of fear of ridicule. My story started 15 years ago in a heavily wooded, marshy area between the Mississippi River and Lake des Allemands in Louisiana. Early spring, my husband and I were out in our 17-foot bass tracker fishing in a canal that was about 20 feet wide. We were tied up on a tree on the left side just chilling, fishing, being quiet, enjoying the silence of the beautiful day in the swamp, when suddenly we heard loud stomping coming from our right. It sounded like a two-legged elephant stomping through the wooded area off the right side of the bank. It was so loud, and the gait was steady, just stomping through without a care, I'd say. I'm sure whatever it was thought, way out there, it was alone. When I heard it, I said to my husband, "What's that?" It was so loud, and nothing I'd hear or expect to hear way out there, and certainly too heavy sounding to be any gait or person, though I can't imagine a person way out there. When I said, "What's that?" the stomping immediately stopped. My voice, I'm sure, traveled across the water, even though I said it quietly, but it was silent out there. At that point, I directed my eyes in the direction of where the stomping had stopped, and I noticed the bushes move. I saw what appeared to be two hands, very high, 7 feet up, pull apart the bushes, and a set of piercing eyes just stare at us. I assure you those eyes are burned in my memory. I tried to show my husband where it was, but he had a hard time distinguishing in all the thickness where they were exactly, but he knew it was weird there. My husband was no sissy. He was a tough Vietnam vet, survival expert, not afraid of anything, but this shook him. It felt weird. This thing stood there for what seemed forever, but in reality maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes is hours, and I think I read this one already too, but I'm going to keep going. Then let bushes go and quietly slipped away. Like I said, the eyes were at 7 feet, so maybe it was 8 feet or more in height. We both thought, let's get the heck out of Dodge. Neither of us knew what we had just experienced, but we knew it was definitely nothing normal, and we didn't want to hang around. So fast forward 8 years later, we're in a group. The subject of Bigfoot came up, not sure why. Anyway, some of the guys are from Mississippi sharing hunting stories, and some swore they had seen full body accounts while hunting and so forth. I listened intently, as I still was afraid to say anything about what I'd seen, as we were in the area where I had this experience. Then someone spoke up and said they had been in the same area as I some years later, and going down this same canal when mysteriously 5 fairly large trees, one by one, fell behind their boat as it went slowly down this canal. Does that sound odd to you? Odder yet, the trees were gone when they came back later that day. That's pretty weird. Anyway, I got brave and shared my story at that point. So my friend, who was friends with the guy that had a reality show on Animal Planet a few years ago and treks that area a lot, said he shared his story with that guy, and his friend just scoffed, said he hadn't had any experiences. I said, that means nothing. I know what happened to me and my husband. And after hearing that strange tree story, there's something going on unexplained. That was definitely nothing I've ever experienced before or since and cannot let go of. It's burned in my memory. Anyway, I believe Sasquatch is everywhere. Just like humans, they are varied in size, color, and appearance, of shape, and size to suit their environment. One size do not fit all. I'm so tired of these sites that say, oh, that or this can't be one because it doesn't look like someone's drawing. Really? Just like we're all unique, I believe so are they. Some good, some bad, all individuals. Thanks, Steve, if you read this. Take care. I know these things, these beings are here. Once you are in even the emotional presence, you're forever in that rabbit hole. Rhonda A. And yes, you are, Rhonda. I know exactly what you mean, and you know that I know. I know exactly what you mean. Once you know, you know. You're in the club of no returners, no going back. And if you're one of the lucky ones that doesn't stay fixated on Sasquatch, your mind will instantly recognize the fact that you are being bullshitted beyond, lied to and misled since day one of your so-called education, right? The education system. Lied to, misled, manipulated, right? To fall in line for some unknown reason. I'm sure we all are getting, I'm sure we all know what the reason is by now, but it's a sad one. You want weird, I've got weird. Titled. Hi Steve, hope all is well. I'm not a great writer, nor do I claim to be. I'm a little like a woman. I kind of know when a period is supposed to come, so I hope the following stories are readable. I've been a fisherman since the age of 5, riding motorcycles at the age of 8, and a hunter from the instant I could hold a daisy. Luckily, I had a father who was an outdoorsman, so I was blessed with all the good things in life. I have more unexplained experiences than I care to remember. So, for the sake of your channel, I thought I would sit down and write out a few of the weirder ones. All the following stories happen in various areas of the Sierra Nevadas, since they are in my backyard, and Dad knew them like the back of his hand. Anyone who has done their share of deep woods hunting in the Sierras will have a story to tell about pine cones landing near them with no pine trees overhead. Loud timber cracks when no wind is present, along with rock clacks and loud wood knocks. Fast-moving lights and orbs are all common here in the Sierras. The first story I want to tell is just to let you know how long I've been aware of these beings. In my younger years, if I were not hunting or fishing, we were camping and riding motorcycles. Our family hung out with a large group of camper/trail riders, and one of their favorite spots to ride logging roads and fire trails was an area in the southern Sierras called Essiom Creek. By the age of 10, I was pretty fast and reckless little daredevil that didn't like riding at a pace of the group. Although Dad would let me cut loose and ride ahead, I was always told not to get farther than 10 minutes ahead of the group, and I was to stop and wait before I could cut loose again. I started noticing while waiting on the group, quite often, I would hear what I would call loud pops in the forest. They were so loud they would echo. I never knew what they were, and being young, didn't care much. Fast forward some years, one of the girls in the group became a pretty good little rider. She could almost keep up, so at least I had someone to wait with while waiting on the group. Once while we were together, I heard loud pops. I asked her if she heard them too, and she replied, yes, that's just loggers. She was a little older than I was, and she answered so quickly that she had to be right. Besides, it sounded logical. It wasn't until years later that I realized I would hear these pops, which I now know as wood knocks, in the midwinter, when there was a foot of snow on the ground and not during logging season. That was my intro into what I know now. What I now know is Sasquatch. Okay, here's where the weirdness starts. I went to school with Ron Moorhead's daughter and Bill McDowell's son. We were all in the same grade. If you don't recognize the names, they are the recorders of the Sierra Sounds. If you're not familiar with it, look it up. Bill lives less than a mile from me now. I can tell you something about these men. They have never claimed in all the research to have ever seen a Sasquatch, not for lack of trying. They are both honest as the day is long, and the recordings are genuine. My father passed away at 58, so I was glad I got to do all my hunting with him at an early age. After he passed, I did all my hunting with friends. In 1986, Bill's son Dale, 2 other non-hunter/beer fetcher/firewood getters, and I made a run up to an area near Bear Valley Ski Resort for opening weekend of bow deer season. Just a quick trip up on Friday night for an early morning hunt on Saturday. This is a nice area that I've been scouting, so I was sure we'd get in and out by noon with success. After setting up camp and getting a fire started, the beer started flowing. During all the campfire banter, I mentioned that Dale's dad was a Sasquatch hunter. Boy, was that a mistake. You see, I had known Dale since the 3rd grade, so I'd heard all the stories that I had to rehear that night, and it was already late. The funny thing was, we were about 40 miles of the crow flies from where his dad and Ron did all the research. Here's where things got crazy. About halfway into telling them how tough of a time his dad and Ron were having getting these beings on film, because during the night these beings would sneak into camp and break the cameras they had set up, just then, like the crack of a whip, all hell broke loose. A freaking monster log came ripping off the top of this ridge that we were camped at the base of. The timber was so thick I couldn't comprehend how in hell this log, which sounded like a never-ending freight train, could possibly even find a path to travel down. Well, it finally came to stop. It sounded like it hit the gates of hell. With my mouth wide open, I turned to Dale, and all he could say was, "Well, they're here." Needless to say, we didn't sleep a wink, and the Sasquatch stories came to a halt. I broke one of my rules to live by about loaded guns in camp that night. I still don't know why we stayed the night. I guess it was a good guy thing. Besides, Dale's dad was still alive, and after facing off with these beings numerous times, we stoked the fire so big I'm surprised we didn't burn down the whole damn forest. We had no further incidents that night. The hunt was a bust. As a matter of fact, I didn't hunt up there for another 3 years. This next story is about my son. I'd raised him as my father raised me, teaching him all that I knew about hunting and fishing. During this period in his life, he was attending school at Sacramento State. It was early on a Sunday morning when I received a call from him. I could hear the excitement in his voice when he started rambling his story. It seems that he had taken his girlfriend on an overnight camping trip not far from one of our hunting spots. He stayed in a campground on the Stanislaus River called Wakaloo. Hep yo. He told me about 10 o'clock on the Saturday night they were all buttoned up in their tent. The tent camping area was pretty full, and there was a group of 5 guys camped about 50 feet below them. They were partying and carrying on so loudly, he said there was no chance of them going to sleep. When out of nowhere came the loudest scream he had ever heard from up the river canyon. He said, "Dad, there's no way this scream came from a human being. It was too loud and entirely too long." He claimed the scream lasted 50 to 60 seconds. It started as a rolling guttural roar and ended up in a high-pitched scream that was ear-piercing, even though it was some distance away. He said after that you could have heard a pin drop in that campground. After a long pause, he said the next thing he heard from the group of 5 was, "What the F was that?" followed by a few "I don't knows," and I never heard anything like that. After that, the whole campground shut down and went to bed. My son became a true Sasquatch believer after that night. I'm sure a few others did as well. He even bought me the Bigfoot book by Nick Redfern. He knew that I was a believer since childhood, so I think the book was to reassure me that he was now a true believer. The story I'm about to tell you was the night Sasquatch almost got me killed. It was 2016. A buddy and I headed up to Cherry Lake. Cherry Lake is on the western border of Yosemite National Park for a late-season rifle deer hunt. Now, I first have to tell you that the terrain around the Cherry Lake area had a massive burn back in '73, 12,500 acres. So although there is a lot of new growth, it is mainly full of huge burnt old pines with new growth filling in the gaps. He'd gotten a late start, so we didn't reach the area we wanted to camp until way after dark. We were deep in the forest, a long way from any main roads. I got the trailer situated and asked him to get started on the dinner while I set up the generator and got us level. I was putting my 3rd stabilizer jack under the trailer when I had the shock of my life. Not 75 yards from where I was laying on my back under the trailer, a huge pine tree came crashing down. Not a limb or section, but the whole effing tree. Now, if you think you can't jump from a laying on your back position, try having a 150-foot tree come crashing down next to you in the dark with no warning. Believe me, I had almost 2 feet of clearance under the trailer and I had no problem smashing my face flat on the underside of it. My buddy came running out of the trailer in as much disbelief as I was in. We both noticed at the same time there was very little wind, so we convinced ourselves it was just a badly burnt tree that was due to come down. Well, after I got my heart calmed down, I was putting the last jack under the trailer, and all that kept running through my head was, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? Hell yes, it does. Not long after eating, we hit the hay. My trailer is a Prowler ultralight 21-foot with pop-out ends, so when we are both in our bunks, we're about 15 feet apart. When I sleep in the woods, I go comatose. I've had friends tell me the only way they can wake me up is by screaming and shaking at the same time. This night was one of those nights, so you'll understand the next part of this story. It was 2 a.m. when I was woken up by my buddy screaming at the top of his lungs. I reached up and flipped on the light to see something I couldn't believe. Not only was he jumping up and down, landing at 1/4 turn intervals, he was waving his 9mm pistol around like Tinkerbell waves her wand, screaming at the top of his lungs, "Who the F is shaking the trailer?" After half a second not believing what I was seeing, I returned a scream of, "Don't you effing shoot me!" He was so excited I felt he would have no trouble squeezing off around in my direction. Yes, I was scared for my life. It took forever to get this guy calmed down. Warm milk and cookies were not going to do it. I had to break out the hard shit. Yes, good old Jack was just good enough to come along on the trip, but not before I took his 9mm and put it under my pillow. The next day was long as they come. I started out that morning with a quick viewing of where the tree had come down and around the trailer. It was still dark, and not being an Indian scout, I had no luck with tracks. The ground was covered with pine needles, and due to the drought, the ground was like concrete. I also checked later that afternoon with no luck. I decided I really didn't want to sleep with him again, so after a long morning hunt, I told him I wasn't feeling well, so I packed up and headed home. I never spoke with him about putting the two events together, but the more I thought about it, it only left me with one conclusion. We had set up a camp on someone else's site, and he didn't want us there. Even though I did not feel the shaking of the trailer, I had no doubts that he experienced it. After all, I'd never seen anything like that jump, spin, move. Not even in the movies. I also have never hunted with him again. Now you understand how Sasquatch almost got me killed indirectly. The last story I have for you was super strange. It starts out with me taking 3 separate trips over a 1-month span to do a little gold prospecting. This time on the southwestern border of Yosemite National Park. I had not been to this area in years, but I used to frequent it a lot when I was younger. My first trip up to the Forest Service had the trail into the river canyon blocked off on top of the ridge. There was a crew up there and plenty of heavy equipment. Way too much equipment for the amount of work they were doing. When I returned 2 weeks later, the crews and equipment were gone. They had closed the entrance to the trail on the top of the canyon with a brand new gate, fencing, and a sign saying that the river canyon was closed due to trail repair until further notice. I don't think they had the right to close the property that belonged to the California taxpayers and not the Forestry Department. The first thing I did was call the Forestry Department, number was on the sign, to find out when they planned on reopening the trail. After talking to a few officers, it was clear they had no reopening date. So I cut a new trail with my Sportsman 500 around all the newly yet poorly designed fencing and headed down into the canyon. I would have done the same thing. I saw that the crews had graded about 100 yards of the trail, just the distance you could see from the gate. Made no sense to me at that time. The river is 2,200 feet straight down from the top of the ridge where they put in the new gate. The trail is about 3 miles long from top to bottom. That should tell you how cliffy it is with numerous switchbacks. The only trees are on the top of the ridge and the base of the canyon where it is both heavily forested. This comes into play later. The rest of the mountain is covered in thick, deep sage like you'll find in Nevada or Wyoming. The trail was tougher than I remembered. After I made it down to the river, I was following a portion of the trail that was really sketchy when I hit a huge hole and it pitched me sideways and almost off a 25-foot cliff. I only had 3 wheels on the ground, and when I tried to back out, I was just sliding further over the cliff. That sucks. I have a winch in my quad, so I pulled out my cable. The only thing I could find to pull me at the right angle was a huge poison oak bush. I want you to know I have never in my life ever had the hair on the back of your neck thing happen to me. This day was the first and only time I've ever felt that. After looking around and not seeing anything, I tried to shake it off to no avail. I got my quad off the cliff and back on the trail. I went down the river about another half mile to a spot I wanted to work. Still having that odd feeling, I loaded up a 5-gallon bucket with material and headed back up the trail. Being very careful at the spot that almost ended me, I climbed out of the canyon and arrived at my truck. As I was strapping down my quad, I started hearing whistling, like you would call your dog type of whistle. It was on a knoll that was steep and heavily forested on both sides. I didn't know what to think, so I whistled back. Yeah, apparently that's a mistake. The indigenous people have always said never whistle in the woods at night, right? I don't know about daytime, but they say not to do it at night. Or whistle back when you hear whistling. Amazement, a whistle came from the opposite side of the knoll where I had heard the first whistle. Same tone as the first whistle. So I just sat there and waited. I didn't have to wait long before I got another whistle from the first side of the saddle. That was enough for one day, so I hopped in my truck and went home. The next day I panned out the material I brought home, and what a find I had. I cannot believe the amount of gold that I had in 3 pounds of dirt. I had to go back. Talking to a friend into going back up with me after showing him what I'd pulled out of 3 pounds. I didn't mention the odd things going on up there. That's dirty pool. The next week he went up, and when you think things couldn't get any weirder, listen to this. We loaded up and headed down into the canyon. We didn't get 300 yards down the trail, and there were 4 trees all wound together and blocking the trail. Like I said, the trail was clippy, so there was no just going around the obstacle. We had to untangle and move it. We jumped back on the quad, and it wasn't 200 yards. There was another roadblock. As I mentioned earlier, there are no trees on this mountain, only at the top of the ridge and the base of the river valley. So this took a lot of work just moving these trees to their locations. My friend at this point didn't believe that this is where I was a week earlier. I had to swear to him that it was. To top it off, we were just getting started. There were 3 more roadblocks for a total of 5 just to get down to the river. When we got down to the river, the roadblocks were much larger, so big in fact that we couldn't move them. The tree sizes were huge, and we didn't have a chainsaw with us, so our trip was over before it started. We had to cross 2 tributaries that fed the river, and I showed my friend that my tracks from the week before were still in the mud, and my tracks were the only ones down there. So who do you think built all the roadblocks? Do you think the Forest Service is trying to hide something they're aware of? I do. Steve, I can't end this without telling you another quick story that has something to do with an educational hunting video that you did not long ago. This was in 1989. My career has always been in sales. I had one client that I always talked hunting with. He was a real nice guy and was also a bow hunter, so I decided to take him to one of my hot spots. I didn't tell him where I was until we were on our way up, just in case for some reason he was unable to make it. On the drive, I mentioned to him that we would be hunting the outside edge of a game reserve off a certain highway. He told me a funny thing. He had a friend whose uncle was a retired warden. A couple of months earlier, he met him, and after a night of talking hunting, somehow they got on the topic of Bigfoot. He told me his story sounded like it was in the same area I was telling him we were going to hunt. He told me his story sounded like it was in the same area I was telling him we were going to hunt. He told me the warden was on the road where the pavement ended at Wye. We went into the sharp S-turn followed by a long straightaway. Now I knew about the Wye, W-Y-E, but couldn't remember whether the pavement ended there, nor did I recall the S-turn or a straightaway. He said the warden told him it was raining cats and dogs. He claimed he came out of the south S-turn and accelerated down the straight when out of nowhere, this Sasquatch jumped on the road right in front of his truck. He said the Sasquatch froze, and he slammed on his brakes, stopping just short of hitting it. He said they made eye contact. Then it turned and jumped off the road, never to be seen again. The story is third-hand, so I don't know what to think, but when we were going to the Wye, W-Y-E. Never read that one before. Sure enough, the pavement ended, followed by an S-turn and a straightaway. I looked, and there were plenty of places down that straight for something to jump off and disappear. So, who was I to doubt this story? We arrived where we were going to start our hunt. My friend got his duffel bag out of the back of the truck. He then pulled a large plastic bag out and unrolled it. Now, when I say I started to gag, that doesn't even come close to what I mean. I mean my eyes were watering. That is how bad the odor was coming out of the bag that he had his boots and gloves, jumpsuit and beanie in. I asked him what in the hell the smell was, and he said skunk scent. I would have better described it as skunk ass that he applied by the gallon. He claimed he had been using it for years and was able to sneak right up on deer regardless of whether they were up or downwind. Once again, who was I to doubt? I watched your scent video and immediately remembered this whole ordeal. I would have to say I might disagree with you on this one because after seeing him suit up, The only place I saw that skin cells could escape his body was from his nose, even though those cells would have stunk. That's it for story time with Uncle Ronnie. Steve, I'm sure curiosity is not only killing me, so when are you going to reveal where the big move will be? I hope for your sake it's not Wyoming. I hear CWD is at 70% among the elk, deer, and antelope. Oh, that sucks. That is so sad to hear. I need to do some more research, but I haven't heard that new scientific studies are showing it is now transmittable to humans. If that isn't a scary thought. Thanks for the channel, Steve, and choose your hunting partners wisely. Make sure they have powder in all their brass and not the white kind. Sincerely, Ron Gilbert. Whew. Okay, Ron, that was a good, solid, long read and share, man. And it's interesting that you grew up with people related to Ron Moorhead and his partner that recorded those sounds. I'm done. I gotta get out of here. I'm beat. I got a ways to go. I'm taking a beating on this logging road. Gotta get home. I don't think Sarah even knows where I am right now. Probably in trouble for that. I'll get back to service in probably an hour and a bit. But everything seems cool here. I didn't feel uneasy here at all. But I'll get back to sharing a lot more often soon. All right. Keep emailing them in. All right. I'll get to them, and I'll get your words heard.